Hey, it's Mike with Aegis. Welcome back. Let's get prepared tonight. I want to go over this evening some of the news that's happening right now. And right now we're going to focus on the two explosive devices, the pipe bombs that were planted outside the RNC and the DNC on January 6th. We're not going to dive into the actual what happened at the Capitol building itself, but I want to dive into these two pipe bombs specifically because as we've been, those of you that are following our channel right now, we're really going over being prepared, and one of those things that we talk about sometimes is what do you do in the case of something like an explosive device. Now, I want to look at just the news aspect of this, and we're going to kind of pick apart this a little bit, and a lot of people are already doing this. Tucker Carlson is covering that, and, I'll have links to that stuff in the description below. Thomas Massie came out with new video footage from January 6th showing that not only were the devices placed in ineffective positions, and this is only my professional opinion on it, placed in ineffective positions to cause any damage to infrastructure or people and to cause harm, but they were also placed the night before. That we actually have now video footage showing that on January 5th, these devices were actually placed. And I'll have those links down below as well. Thomas Massie released that video information. And let's now go over that a little bit. And you can kind of take from this what you will as well for your own family safety as it pertains to real devices. Because in my professional opinion, I don't think these were actual real devices, that they were real pipe bombs designed to set off and cause damage and harm. Okay. Now let's go into the why. Okay. And as you see, we got a whiteboard here, so we're going to do a little bit of drawing, a little bit of technical know-how into this, and pick it apart. So, first off, the placement of the devices was fairly dubious. And what I mean by that is that, from a bomb tech's perspective, where the pipe bombs were placed, they would not have been effective in causing casualties or harm to the building. Okay. First off, let's just look about what was inside those devices. In a worst case scenario, a pipe bomb like that and that size, we would estimate a net explosive weight of about 5 pounds. Okay, this is just a rough estimate, and that's just based off of a K-factor calculation, which is a algebraic equation that just gives us based on what risks we're willing to take and how much we want to reduce blast overpressure as far as pounds per square inch, how far we need personnel to be away from a blast site. Okay. So we're not going to go through the whole K-factor calculation. We're just going to base it off of just a rough estimate of 5 pounds of net explosive weight. Now, that net explosive weight, if we even say if it was 5 pounds, that's going to be based off of a TNT equivalent. Okay, and what we mean by that is that when we talk about explosive measurements, TNT is kind of used as a standard of measurement in which all of the explosives are measured against, and that slides up and down where you have something like Big Bad Scary C4 and Semtex that you see in movies. That stuff's going to be much more powerful, whereas something like ammonium nitrate is going to be a little less than that. And with pipe bombs, typically what we see is that pipe bombs are not, especially in the U.S., which is the most common form of IED in the United States. What we find is that those are usually filled with pyrotechnics, flash powders, or black powders, gun powders, things like that. We call those low explosive. They're designed to burn. They burn violently. They produce a lot of gas. And what they do is they create a mechanical explosion where the gas pressurization inside that pipe overcomes the structural resistances and the pipe blows apart. Now, this is something similar to, say, the Boston Marathon bombing, where they utilized pressure cookers, and those pressure cookers were filled with pyrotechnics on the inside. The pyrotechnics cook off, it builds up gas pressure very quickly, and as you saw with that event, you get a large detonation that can cause a lot of casualties and harm and cause damage to infrastructure. So those were quite larger than these devices that were supposedly planted on January 6th. Okay, now if we say that net explosive weight is about 5 pounds, that gives us roughly a mandatory evacuation distance of about 70 feet. Okay, now this is again based off of a TNT equivalent. Okay, if this was on the inside, what typically we see, and that's just statistically, this is the most common filler inside of a pipe bomb, is actually a black powder based, so not TNT. But we're going to be black powder. That TNT equivalent drops by over 50% the actual effective power from a mechanical explosion compared to TNT. So that drops by, it's actually 0.55 the power. Okay, so that 5 pounds is essentially about a 2.5 pound device. Okay, Again, assuming that it was, I'm not physically there to weigh that. This is just, again, we're a speculation at that. So you roughly have a 2.5-pound device. This is half the power of TNT, and that essentially drops that mandatory evacuation distance down from 70 feet to 35 feet. Okay. Now this is only protection from blast overpressure. Okay. So this is only from overpressure. Okay. Fragmentation, which is on the outside of that device, and that's the pipe itself. All that fragmentation, that goes a much larger distance, okay? And we're with 5 pounds based on TNT with a pipe bomb, that fragmentation can travel roughly up to about 1,200 feet, okay? But if we're cutting that power in half, I mean, we're dropping that down to about a 600-foot possibility of, the furthest distances that fragmentation could go. And this is your smaller pieces that might travel a lot longer distance, or something that picks up quite a bit of momentum and travels long ways. That lethality threshold has dropped drastically. It's dropped in half. Now the other big issue is, and you'll see that in the videos, and I'll from that Thomas Massey provided, and I'll throw those in the link in the description below. But if we look at where that device was placed, the device was actually placed near 2 park benches. We had a building behind it, and we had a bunch of shrubbery. This is very technical drawings right here, very advanced stuff, okay? As you can tell, I'm very much an artist, so here's our park benches, look pretty, okay? And that pipe bomb was placed right about there, okay? Underneath the bush, with the end caps, which is the thickest part of those pipes, facing 1 against the building and 2 down towards the ground. The shrubbery has a little bit of an embankment on it, and you can tell from where it's placed that those end caps, were that to be a device that actually went off, would detonate, those pipes would go against the ground and it would skid along the ground, or then the back end cap would actually go into the building itself. All the other fragmentations from the body of that's going to go outwards. The ground's going to absorb everything underneath it, and the shrub that it's placed over, and it is over it, is going to help abate some of that fragmentation. A lot of the fragmentation, if it were a device, would go through it because it's just shrubbery, okay? But some of it still would get deflected and thrown off course, okay? And reduce the velocity of those individual fragment pieces. The other issue is that you have these 2 park benches here, and those park benches are absolutely going to help abate and dampen some of that blast effect, in addition to stopping the momentum and the travel of those fragmentation pieces. This is not an effective placement for a device if I were going to try to cause damage to the building, okay? First off, is this a spot, normally what we see in counterterrorism with a device like this is that you'll find something like this, or a device placed where there's high traffic, where I'm going to cause lots of harm. Well, this wasn't even at the entrance of the building itself. It's a little kind of park area in front of it. If I wanted to be more effective, I don't want to arrest the momentum of those fragmentation pieces, and I don't want to dampen the effect of that blast wave, okay? So what was the purpose of putting these devices out? I believe, and this is just, again, speculation, that these devices were placed out and quite possibly could have been placed by certain organizations, and draw what you will from that on your own, to tie that to the events that happened at January 6th. And the other reason I say that is because now there is security footage that has come out provided by individuals in the government, such as Senator Thomas Massey, showing that the pipe bomb may very well have been placed January 5th, the night before. And if this was if the events of January 6th were a natural occurring event, that would basically cancel that idea. That throws that completely into question, especially if you're trying to tie the two together. It doesn't work. These two events don't work in tandem unless you view them both from the lens that there were staged actors in this event itself. Okay, that's more or less what I'm extrapolating to. But again, draw your own conclusions with this. Real world, even if this wasn't a real device, if you were to see something like this, you still want to treat it as a real device, just on that off chance that it was a real device and you yourself could get hurt or your family can get hurt, okay? A good example of this, when you treat something that is suspicious as real, that can save lives, if we go back to the Spokane Martin Luther King thwarted bomber, and I believe that was in 2000, 10. I might have that wrong. I'll correct that on the screen if that's incorrect. But we had a couple office workers on a lunch break during the Martin Luther King parade, and they walked by a park bench. They noticed a bag that was just sitting there. They saw a wire sticking out of it. They thought that was suspicious. They called the police, and the police responded. They diverted the parade, and sure enough, it was a full IED built into this. That utilized fishing weights as fragmentation, a large pipe on the inside, and used a car alarm key fob, meaning that that bomber was waiting and had command control detonation of that device, and he was timing it to attack that parade. So fortunately, no one was harmed. That was thwarted. Great job by the Spokane Police Bomb Squad and the Spokane Police Force. So awesome on them when that occurred. But again, when you see things that are out of the ordinary for what you would see every day. They would walk by that park bench every day, and they thought that was odd seeing it that particular day, seeing a backpack by itself on a park bench. That was enough to get their intuition going, where they said, hey, maybe something's wrong here, and to make that call. And you can do that for yourself too. It's paying attention to your surrounding environment, paying attention to the world around you, paying attention where threats can come from, having that mental checklist that we kind of touch on constantly here. So again, with that, when it comes to this device, I honestly don't think that this was a real device. And another reason that came out is that now information has come out that the certain three-letter organizations have used devices very similar to this as training aids. Is that out of the ordinary? Absolutely not. In my time in my profession, I've built many of training aids like that and of better caliber to help train police officers and first responders such as fire and EMTs, and to help teach them how they need to respond to emergency situations involving an explosive device. So we don't, this happens, and they can go missing. So is that a possibility? They went missing and somebody placed them there? Quite possibly. However, many organizations that use these training aids have strict command and control of these devices in order to not create an emergency situation that is a false alarm. They want to prevent that stuff, because that ends up being a waste of resources when law enforcement and first responders and fire department bomb squads come out to respond to a device, and it turns out it's not a real device. It is a waste of resources, a waste of taxpayers' money. So in order to prevent that, there's usually strict command and control of training aids. So could they have gone missing? Certainly. Is it likely? Probably not. Okay. Now, the other interesting portion of this is what was attached to this device was, we had this pipe bomb, okay, was a large kitchen timer, okay? And that specific kitchen timer only goes up, and it's a mechanical timer, and that mechanical timer only goes up to 60 minutes. So if this was placed the night before, this should have detonated well in advance of the actual events that occurred the next day on January 6th. So then that begs into question, what was the purpose of this device? The purpose was, well, if it was one of these training aids, then the purpose was to not hurt anybody, but to create a photo op, an opportunity to tie things together and to help create and forge narratives. Yeah, this is only my opinion on this. You don't have to believe that. Do your own research. Do your own digging on that, okay? Ultimately, what I want you to get out of this is that even in a situation like this where, yes, there's some tomfoolery going on around here with this whole event, with these devices, them being placed the night before, it being quite possibly a training aid, having a 60-minute timer when a device is placed the night before, and then in the videos themselves that just got released, you see police officers in the area, but there's children walking across the street into that 70 to 35 foot blast radius, and just walking like it's a normal day. These first responders were just allowing people to just travel normally. That it seemed more like it was a photo opportunity to take, to just take pictures with it, and again to create narrative. So, do what you will with that information. Ultimately, I just want you guys to be prepared in the end and pay attention to the world around you. Always seek information and do your own research. Never just dig from one source and one source alone. That's never going to, bolster yourself or let you question narratives and question things that are posed to you. Okay, you should always do that information, dig that information yourself. So ultimately, I just want you prepared, not scared, and that's all I've got for you this evening. So stay safe out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below, and join our channel as we're continuing to grow, as we have new and exciting things coming out, and we'll have some new videos coming this week and next week, pertaining to more news events that are happening, but also some more fun shooting videos and new videos on our top home defense firearms, just for yourself and for your community. So God bless and good night.